The business model, to me, for all three appear to be very much the same, and that is to just kind of push yourself out into the public discussion. Don't operate in the grays, don't operate in the back rooms, just sort of use celebrity endorsements in the case of prediction markets and sweepstakes, advertising in case of skill games. Just push yourself out there, become, part of the public discussion and just sort of a known factor in the public domain, and then all of a sudden, becomes ubiquitous and people just sort of get used to it being there, and, it's hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube at that point.
Welcome once again to Low Rollers, the weekly gambling industry podcast presented by CasinoReports.com in partnership with DraftKings Casino. Yes, in partnership with DraftKings Casino. We have a new partner. More on that in just a minute. But first, I am the ultimate low roller, Eric Raskin, the senior editor at Third Planet Media. You can read my work on CasinoReports.com, Ingame.com, and LotteryGeeks.com. And of course, subscribe to this podcast, rate this podcast, all that good stuff. Coming up in just a few minutes on this week's pod, I'll be joined by Steve Cook, the chief counsel for the Pennsylvania Gambling Control Board. Pennsylvania, of course, is where the state Supreme Court recently ruled that skill games are slot machines and are illegal unless regulated as slot machines, a major ruling with lots of implications, not just in Pennsylvania, but potentially nationwide, as states are taking all different approaches to these gaming machines. So Steve will give his perspective on all that, and also on the larger picture of sweepstakes and prediction markets and all the other complications that have emerged in the last few years for regulators. But before I bring on Steve, and before I start digging into what's happening in the gaming world this week, I want to tell you about DraftKings Casino. Thanks to DraftKings Casino for sponsoring this podcast. I play on DraftKings. In my home state of Pennsylvania, we have casino, sportsbook, daily fantasy. You can engage in any of those verticals at DraftKings. And the casino specifically recently introduced flex spins. You can probably do the math on what a flex spin is. Surely you know what a spin is if you play casino games. And then flex, that's flexibility. That's putting the choice in the hands of the players when it's time to decide how to use your rewards. Here's the deal. New DraftKings Casino players play $5 and get 1,000 flex spins over 20 days. You choose how to use them across a selection of 100 plus slots. It's 50 flex spins a day for 20 days, and you can redeem them on the slots of your choosing. You're not restricted to a single game or a small group of titles, as you often are with traditional bonus spins. So, regular listeners know I love the Huff and Puff games. You can use your flex spins on Huff and Puff one day, then use them on Cash Eruption the next, then Cleopatra or Whitney Houston or Triple Gold the day after that. We're coming up on 4th of July weekend. Independence is on the brain. Freedom is on the brain. Flex spins give you the freedom to use your rewards how you want. For the promotion, you must be 21 years of age, physically present in Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, or West Virginia. Void in Ontario. Eligibility restrictions apply. One per new DraftKings Casino customer. Opt-in required. Game availability may vary. Offer ends July 22nd. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER in Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. Okay, so I do love me my online slots, my very, very low stakes online slots, but my first love in gambling was poker, and on the day this podcast drops, Thursday, July 2nd, this happens to be Day 1A of the 2026 World Series of Poker main event. Depending on when you listen to this, someone is either about to say shuffle up and deal or someone just said it, and I just have to say a quick word as this gets underway about the defending champion, Michael the Grinder Mizrachi, a holdover from the early poker boom days. He was an emerging star in 2005 when I first got on the poker beat. The same month I became editor-in-chief of All In magazine, Grinder won the WPT's LA Poker Classic for $1.86 million. He was 24 years old, and he was off and running. And last year at the World Series, he had the absolute dream year. He won the Poker Players Championship for a record 4th time, which is insane enough. And then he won the main event less than 3 weeks later for $10 million. They inducted him into the Poker Hall of Fame on the spot, which we don't need to relitigate. I think it's absurd to throw out the rules and induct people on the spur of the moment, but obviously Mizrachi belongs in the Hall of Fame, and he would have gotten voted in this summer for sure if they hadn't torn up the rule book last year. So, right result, wrong process, maybe. Anyway, on Monday night, Grindr did it again. He won the 10K PLO championship for another $1.35 million and his 9th career bracelet. And what can you say? This is just extraordinary. 9 bracelets, 6 of them paying over $1 million. One of those, of course, paying $10 million. And in a field of about 10,000 players, you never expect a defending champ to successfully defend his title. That hasn't happened since Johnny Chan in the late 80s when there were under 200 people playing. But, would it be at all surprising to see Grindr just run everyone over for the next couple of weeks and go back to back? It's a 1 in 10,000 shot that feels like almost a 50-50 with this guy. Anyway, good luck to everyone playing in the main event this year, even though you're drawing dead if you aren't the Grindr. I'm sitting this one out, waiting to pony up my 10K until Grindr retires. Then I'm in for 10K, no doubt. Okay, enough poker talk for now. Please enjoy a few seconds of music, and when I come back, I'll be joined by Steve Cook. So-called skill games, or VGTs or VLTs, depending on which state you're in, have been a major topic in the industry of late, particularly the last couple of weeks, and Pennsylvania has emerged as a central battlefield here, especially since the state Supreme Court ruled on June 15th that these games are illegal slot machines. So, joining me now on the podcast is the chief counsel for the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board, a man front and center in the legal fight over skill games and all things gaming, really, in Pennsylvania, Steve Cook. Steve, welcome to Low Rollers.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. I want to start by just defining how these skill games work for anyone who's unfamiliar, because I heard you explain this on the Behind the Bets PA podcast with Doug Harbaugh, and it sounds like the skill element exists, but strictly as a loophole to legality. It isn't really meant to be a part of the experience. Hardly anyone does the skill part. Is that accurate from your perspective?
Well, you have to really take a step back and talk about what is gambling in Pennsylvania. So every state or in the United States typically has 3 elements to what is gambling. Consideration, you put up some money. Using a chance for is the second point, and for the chance of a reward. So 3 things: consideration, chance, and a reward. Where states vary is the chance element. So in Pennsylvania, we have what's called the predominant factor test, which is a court-decided test to determine what role chance plays in gaming. And what the courts have said in the Commonwealth for the last 30 or 40 years was that chance must predominate in order for something to be gambling, to meet the chance element. So it has to be 51% or more of chance in order for it to be gambling. What has happened in Pennsylvania and other jurisdictions that have a predominant factor test is that skill games have come in and thrived with the argument that they are not predominantly chance, rather they are predominantly skill. And the way these machines, different manufacturers have different tweaks, but the way these machines generally work there's like 2 levels of play. So you go in, you put your dollar in the machine, you press a button, reels spin like a slot machine, and typically what is generated is a tic-tac-toe board where just under spin of the reels, which is random, you may get a tic-tac-toe and win, or you may have the opportunity to move one piece with your finger to use some skill. The courts in Pennsylvania have basically said that is skill, but is not enough skill. It is still predominantly chance. So that doesn't get you there. But there is many of the manufacturers, or if not all of the manufacturers, have a second level of play, whereas if you lose the chance element, the spin of the reels, you can move on voluntarily to a second level of play, which is skill predominant. And typically it's a memory game. And typically, it's a difficult memory game. It may go out 30 or 40 spaces of a pattern that you have to memorize, and it takes several minutes to do it, maybe 10 or 15 minutes to do it. And if you successfully do it, you win your bet back plus 4 or 5%. So you put your money in, you lose the reel, spin, even moving one piece. You choose to go to the skill element. It's difficult. It takes several minutes, and you basically only have the chance of getting, even if you're successful, of getting 100 of your wager back. But the courts, until the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania spoke to it, have said that skill element, level 2, even though most players don't appear to be playing it, because how long it takes to try to win your money back, that was enough to make it a skill game. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court found that not to be the case. And ultimately, because the Gaming Act defines skill slot machines as a slot machine, ultimately the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said, notwithstanding all this skill, it is a slot machine under the Gaming Act, because the Gaming Act does include machines with a skill element.
Okay. And so take us behind the scenes a little of the legal battle to get it to that point. How long had this been brewing to come before the Pennsylvania Supreme Court? How long was this journey?
Roughly a decade or more. So
okay.
It started in, I believe, 2014 in Beaver County. There's 67 counties in Pennsylvania, Beaver County being one of them. The Court of Common Pleas there, which is the county trial court, a judge there found these machines to be predominantly skill because of that second level of play. And as a result, not slot machines because they weren't predominated by chance. So one or two manufacturers kind of took that decision and ran with it, solicited their machines to various businesses throughout the Commonwealth, showed them this court opinion, told them they were on solid legal ground, and they've really flourished since that point. A couple of years later, when they really started to flourish, law enforcement started getting involved. Pennsylvania State Police in particular started getting involved, confiscated these machines, charged people with criminal offenses. That worked its way through the courts, ultimately to the Commonwealth Court in Pennsylvania, which is an intermediary a court, not one level lower than the Supreme Court. And the Commonwealth Court unanimously said, no, Beaver County was right. Because of this level 2 play, which is all skill, these are predominated by skill, and therefore they are not slot machines under the Crimes Code. And yes, the Gaming Act has a definition of skill slot machine, which falls under the definition of slot machine in the Gaming Act. However, the court said the Gaming Act doesn't apply. It only applies to licensed and regulated gaming like casinos in Pennsylvania. So those two holdings by the Commonwealth Court in separate cases sort of hamstrung everybody from doing anything, and the machines flourished even further.
So what was it, the PGCB directly that was appealing these rulings, or was there a different sort of plaintiff driving this?
We attempted to intervene in a couple of these cases, but we were not directly involved.
Okay.
The Department of Revenue was directly involved because of the tax implications. Actually, one of the manufacturers instituted a lot of skill games manufacturers instituted a lot of this litigation, seeking clarity on their own behalf. So it took years to get up to the Commonwealth Court. Commonwealth Court held what it held, and then it took another year, 18 months or so, to get to the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court reversed the Commonwealth Court and said, no, the Gaming Act does apply. There's a definition for skill games under the definition of slot machine in the Gaming Act. The Gaming Act, the Commonwealth Court was wrong to say that the Gaming Act only applies to regulated gaming, because to say that would mean that the General Assembly created this universe of highly taxed and highly regulated casino gaming only to allow somebody down the street to do it without any regulation whatsoever, and it just didn't make sense. So the Supreme Court reversed the Commonwealth Court.
What was your level of confidence that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court would rule the way it did? When
the Commonwealth Court decided it unanimously, I was shocked that there was not one dissenting judge. When the Supreme Court took it up, and I attended the oral arguments. The oral arguments were very much in favor of going opposite where the Commonwealth Court landed. So coming out of those oral arguments, I was very confident, and the ultimate decision that came down sort of supported that confidence.
I know there's a 120-day window from that June 15th ruling until the law really fully goes into effect. So that's mid-October. But I'm also reading it. It sounds like skill games aren't getting into this year's budget, so we won't get them legalized and taxed inside that window. If I'm understanding that correctly, or do I have that wrong? That there's a chance that could all get done this year.
Well, number one, the 120-day ruling. I think the Supreme Court was cognizant of the fact that these things are so ubiquitous throughout the Commonwealth at this point, and so many small businesses now rely on the income from these machines that they wanted to give the General Assembly the opportunity to, in that 120 days, to attempt to come up with a regulatory structure to allow, to one degree or another, to allow these things to remain in the community. I don't think they'll be as ubiquitous as they are now, but to a certain degree. So that's, I believe, why the 120 days was granted. Relative to whether it will happen in conjunction with the budget, I've been around Harrisburg long enough to tell you that until the budget's signed, everything's on the table. I can't really say whether it will be done with the budget or whether it will be, worked on through the summer and voted on in the fall. The 120 days runs mid-October. We'll see. It's out of my hands at this point. But again, the budget, until it's signed, you don't know what's going to happen, really.
So I saw a story a few days ago that the Pittsburgh City Council voted to tax the machines. So it doesn't need to be one uniform state tax rate. Different cities or counties can move independently on this. Is that what I'm to interpret from that story?
I think at the moment they can operate
Okay.
independently, but once there's a statewide tax structure, I believe that would apply. Whatever it says, it would apply universally.
Right. Okay. This is, of course, part of a larger trend in gaming with sweepstakes and prediction markets, a trend toward people looking for gray areas to operate in. Could you have imagined a few years back that such a big part of your job and the PGCB's challenge would be dealing with so many different forms of non-state regulated gambling coming into Pennsylvania?
No, I mean, I've started with the board in 2006, and really the advancement of technology and the internet and how the internet is used has really sort of caused many of these gray areas to flourish. And no, I didn't. Pennsylvania was relatively new to the casino, or Pennsylvania was a relatively new, casino business when I started, and we were so focused on that we didn't even really think outside the box. But then these things started to pop up. The thing that I've found interesting with everything you mentioned, with skill games, with prediction markets, and with sweepstakes, is how the business model, to me, for all three appear to be very much the same, and that is to just kind of push yourself out into the public discussion. Don't operate in the grays, don't operate in the back rooms, just sort of use celebrity endorsements in the case of prediction markets and sweepstakes, advertising in the case of skill games. Just push yourself out there, become, part of the public discussion and just sort of a known factor in the public domain, and then all of a sudden, it becomes ubiquitous and people just sort of get used to it being there, and it's hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube at that point.
I guess it is, but I guess you could also maybe make the case that they're flying too close to the sun with how bold some of them are being. I certainly sweepstakes seems to be the one that is headed in the wrong direction from the operator's perspective. Is there a case to be made that if some of these gray area operators had come along and tried to go about their business more quietly, maybe they wouldn't be getting as much pushback as they are?
Yeah, I suppose that's true. I suppose that could be true. But sweepstakes, Pennsylvania, really, I don't want to say it's not an issue. It is an issue in Pennsylvania. But I think the states that have regulated casino iGaming, it's less of a problem than some other jurisdictions that don't have it. Because, some of the sweepstakes sites, when you compare it to iCasino sites that we have available, regulated and licensed, I just think a lot of times the product's better, it's easier for the consumer to use and that sort of thing. So I think the free market sort of takes care of sweepstakes to a certain degree in a jurisdiction with regulated iGaming.
As long as you brought up the regulated online casino, this question may be outside your purview to an extent, but I'm curious if you have a take on it. Are you surprised other states see the revenue for Pennsylvania from online casino every month and are so darn reluctant to legalize it? Are you surprised that it hasn't caught on more than it has, given the money that it clearly generates? I'm
a little surprised, but I also, with it come problems. There's There's when you basically carry a casino around in your pocket on your phone. There's compulsive and problem gambling issues that have come along with that. There's also increased fraud and identity theft and those sorts of things that come along with iGaming. So it's not all golden. There are some downsides which we have to deal with, and as one of the early entrants, we're sort of the guinea pig. So it's been very successful in one respect, but it's also been filled with some headaches in another respect, and I think some jurisdictions see that, and at least some members of their various general assemblies don't really want to go down that path. In Pennsylvania, I do think it's been far more positive than negative, and we will continue to deal with the issues, but I also understand how some jurisdictions, particularly maybe a more conservative jurisdiction, might not want to do that.
Would you say from the PGCB's perspective that online casino is any more challenging to regulate than brick and mortar casino or online sports betting or anything else? Or is it just a case of different more so than more challenging, just that they're kind of different to regulate?
Yeah, I think it's more apples and oranges than anything. And a different skill set. We have casino compliance representatives in the casinos in Pennsylvania, and we have the equivalent of people monitoring, online operations, but physically being there is a little bit different than, online surveillance and monitoring things. So they both have their ups and downs, but they are sort of apples and oranges.
Now, just sort of looking at the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's ruling from the other side, I know you see this as a correct ruling, that these are slot machines. But, there are people out there rallying in favor of these games, saying they keep small businesses viable, taxing them could put the Legion Hall or the local tavern or whatever out of business. Is there an image concern here that, that the venues hosting skill games are going to be seen as the good guys and the lawyers and regulators fighting against them as the bad guys?
I suppose that's possible, but I think with the fair law being written, hopefully, and fair regulation, I think everybody will realize that this is actually the better way to go. Wrap our arms more around the compulsive and problem gambling issue, underage issue. Problem with some skill games parlors was they're letting teenagers in, even like middle school age kids or younger. So we'll be able to kind of put some guardrails up, I think, that everybody will eventually see is the better way to go.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was figuring, is that when you educate the public about the underage gambling that's going on with these machines and the way that regulating helps with that problem in particular, that you'll get more of the public on the side of the ruling that the Supreme Court made.
For my sense, and maybe it's because who they're speaking to, but most people that over the years have talked to me about skill games were shockingly surprised how sort of laissez-faire and Wild West the environment was, and sort of yearned for some structure.
And skill games, this isn't just a Pennsylvania thing, of course. VGTs were legalized in parts of Illinois. There's talk of Bally's opening airport gaming lounges. In Missouri, you have bar owners suing the state attorney general for cracking down on them. I assume you're watching these other states closely?
Yeah, we are constantly monitoring other jurisdictions, what's going on, what they're doing. Actually, I have a call later today with the multi-state group of regulators to talk about various things. So yeah, we all sort of talk. It's a relatively small community that we all sort of share war stories and ideas and concepts and everything else.
Is there any one state in particular that you see as a bellwether kind of, or is it a case of Pennsylvania is the bellwether that everyone else seems to be watching?
We often look to New Jersey. They're our neighbor. They've been in this game longer than us. And we a lot of times bounce a lot of ideas off of each other. So New Jersey and Nevada, of course, are two states that we look to quite a bit. But I do like to think that Pennsylvania is sort of on the forefront of a lot of these things as well.
Last thing, I know you went to Penn State. I believe you live just outside Philadelphia. So does that make you a Philly sports fan like I am?
I live closer to Harrisburg than Philadelphia, but I am a Philly sports fan. Yeah, go Birds. Yeah.
That's how you know. If you say go Birds, that proves it. So, did you manage to live bet the Phillies ahead of any of their crazy ninth inning comebacks last week?
Well, I'm not allowed to, so I
Okay.
didn't. But I was actually at the beach last week. I took the week off and I was at the beach and just burning around doing different things. Those I didn't get to see any of those games. Like I missed 3 or 4 great games in a row, and then I watched last night, which was a disaster.
So it was more you just caught up on the box scores afterwards, and
Exactly.
but you had missed the actual drama going down. Well, since you said go Birds, I know you can't bet it, but over under 9.5 wins this season. Which
Over.
way are you leaning?
Over.
Okay, no hesitation.
It's a lock. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast, Steve. It was great speaking with you. Thanks for clearing up a lot of this stuff about skill games, and we'll all be watching to see how the next few months unfold. But thanks so much for joining me on Low Rollers.
Thank you.
Okay, my thanks again to Steve. Always good to squeeze in a Go Birds. So 2 quick personal gambling notes before I sign off for the week. Sports betting update first. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that I took advantage of a DraftKings promo. Shout out again to our sponsor, DraftKings. They had a World Cup promo where you bet $10 or more on a tournament winner and you get $2 in bonus bets for every goal they score, up to $20. As I said, I went with Germany at 14-1. They lost on penalty kicks in their first game of the knockout round, so I won't be making $140 there. But they did do a decent amount of scoring, so I got the max amount available with the promo, a $20 bonus bet. And I consulted with a friend of mine who knows soccer and has been following the tournament closely. I asked him for an underdog I could bet on, and so, well, I'm recording this Wednesday afternoon. By the time you hear it, you'll know how I did. But I don't know just yet. I put my $20 bonus bet on Senegal against Belgium at plus 130, so you will know as you listen to this whether I turned my $10 investment into $0 or $26. Surely my mood on next week's podcast will reflect this outcome. My other gambling note, I've been dabbling this week with the new Monopoly Rush Hour slot game, and I say this having made 2 free spin bonus rounds and won a lot more than I've lost so far, but this game is too much. It's too busy. There's too much to track. I can't always tell what's happening. I'm watching the reels, then I'm watching tiny dice roll, then I'm watching pieces move around a game board. I can't always tell what causes what or what I should be rooting for. Again, if I finish with more in my account than I started with, great, cool, I'll take that, but I don't know, it's sensory overload. But at least each spin is over in about 3 or 4 seconds instead of taking 4 hours like a real game of Monopoly. And speaking of things going on too long, I should probably wrap it up there. Until next week, this has been Low Rollers, Small Stakes, and Hot Takes.